Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast, sponsored by Excelsior Music and Premier Music Teaching Aids. This is episode number 336. I'm here with composer and past educator Christina Huss. Christina, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Kyle?
Beautiful. Thank you for making the time and being with us. So you're from Georgia, right? How's the weather down there?
Oh, it's muggy. It's 80 degrees and we're under thunderstorm warnings. So it's a beautiful day.
Well, I'm getting 6 inches of snow tonight, so a little different story here.
Oh my word.
That's not a big deal when you're from the north. That's just like a Tuesday.
Got you.
As you look back on a full career as a band director, what do you remember the most? What sort of things stick out to you in retrospect as being sort of the most important as you look back on things?
Oh my gosh, that's such a hard question to pick one thing or I have thought about it. And each time I can tie it with a common thread. And I think I look back on my time as a band director. Um, I think the most amazing parts of my job, I could feel such pride with my students as I would watch them accomplish various things. And I don't, of course, we had the accomplishment that several students would make an honor band or a region band or a all state band. And then on graduation day, when you're playing pomp and circumstance and you're watching half the band go up there as honor students.
Hmm.
But I mean, I've been very lucky and blessed, and we've had several students over the years that turned out to be professional musicians and um, play with Wynton Marsalis at Kennedy Center, or we've got senators and congressmen and doctors and people that have invented medical procedures, for surgery. So it's just, I think if I pick one thing, it's just that pride, that proud band mama kind of feeling
Hmm.
at the sounding corny of watching kids do well. I mean, in school and then long after they leave school. So I'm gonna go that way with that answer.
I love that. A lot of times when I ask that question, the answer centers around people. It centers around the people that they were with and whether it's what they're doing now or the impact they were able to make with them. It's funny. I think the younger teachers, when we're younger, it's more about the accolades, it's more about the accomplishments, it's more about what you can achieve. And then the older you are in the profession, you realize it's more about the people that you're around than anything else. These are things that I'm learning along the journey.
Yes, and I wouldn't have picked myself when I first started teaching as being the sentimental type, you know.
Hmm.
But as it turns out, to me, my best memories are wrapped in the lives of the kids themselves, and what they were able to achieve, and how band even played such a part in so many areas besides music for them. All the different things that they learned while being a member of a musical organization, and how they took that to the courtroom or to the operating room or whatever.
So today we're gonna be listening to some of your music. People probably know you as a composer, and if they don't, they do now, and they should. Um, and I love the pieces we're gonna listen to. I've made some notes, but I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about them. But before we do that, looking back on your time as middle school band director, what were some of the pieces that you love to use that you think people should use these pieces that you loved?
Gosh, I will tell you, I did most of my career as a high school director, but then I did like an extended 10 years
That's right. That's right.
in middle school. And when I actually left high school and went back to middle school, I was able to remember kind of why I fell in love with band to begin with. And there were a couple of go-to pieces that I don't know, I just attribute a lot of my success to those pieces. And I would have to name May Song by Willie Owens as one of those pieces. I believe it's a level 2 band piece. It became my go-to teaching tool for lyrical and teaching musical nuance and that sort of thing. It's just written so well, Kyle. I mean, it's in a very thoughtful key of E flat. Has beautiful, warm melodies, harmonies. All the ranges are really playable. My kids love that piece, and I would. It was one of those pieces that I would pass out and I would hear it, down the hall, or I would hear it during study hall. Somebody would whip out their clarinet and be playing May song, um, which is pretty amazing being that it's a lyrical piece. The kids
Right.
usually pick out these really driving, faster pieces, but I would hear May song wafting through the halls at the middle school. So I would say May song, and then maybe this one will fly. I love the Bennett band books by Larry Clark. I think he did. I know he did 2 volumes of march books. And those marches were my workhorses
Hmm.
in my band room. Um, I remember when, I don't know about other middle school directors, but teaching march style, and knowing that it's a march and it's not going to sound like all those pieces that the kids are used to hearing on the radio, or they're not going to be able to go home and ask their mom, can they help them with the melody for King Cotton or something. But these books were just so good. They're again thoughtfully written, and were I was able to do a lot with marches with seventh and eighth grade bands using. There were just tons of marches in those books. So even though it's more than one march, it's a series of books by Larry Clark. I think it's called the Bennett Band
Love that.
book. Yeah. And then May Song by Willie Owens.
So thinking about marches, you seem to have such a lot of experience teaching marches. So let's dig into the march thing a little bit. I know we didn't prepare for this, but what are some of the things that you would strive to have other directors do when they're preparing a march? Like some tactical things that you can do with a march that maybe you learned through doing those.
Oh gosh, well, if you're playing, and I think I'm answering your question. If not, ask again. But I remember when I first came out in the 1980s, in the 1980s. uh, there a lot of things weren't actually printed in the music. There was a lot of music that you had to read into those marches, and um, so I would say do score study. Make sure that you look at those scores and check out all the little places where you can put little stabs and punches and excitement. You can build exciting places within the marches. Um, Teach the form, basic march form, so that the kids know what's coming up, where they're going to repeat. I remember when I was a student, I never knew where to go back to. And so I think it would be, well, it was always helpful for me to first introduce marches, on the smart board and just show the basic form of the march and how to read a march. Then we talked about all of the different sections, and then how to play the march, how to accent notes, long notes, unexpected long notes, and um, types of articulations, that aren't written, uh, and explain those things. And I guess when I went back to middle school, because I had taught high school, I didn't know any better not to just tell them everything I knew about the marches, and they learned them. If I had told them just 2 or 3 things, they would have only played 2 or 3 things. But because I just kind of inundated their ears with tons and tons of information and articulations and dynamic interpretations, they did those things. And I'm not sure I answered your question. I'm
You
rambling,
you
but
you did, and you just ran kind of into something I was going to talk about is like the fact that you can change dynamics, that you can interpret the march more than what's there.
sure.
And that's a great thing for teachers to think about. Like just because it's not notated in a march doesn't mean you can't try it. Now, I wouldn't make the break strain this lyrical work, right? I wouldn't make the trio this aggressive thing. Like you have to stay to the character of the title of the piece, but try doing subito piano and then forte the second time. Try adding crescendos and decrescendos and making the music come alive. We have that.
Exactly.
We have that freedom.
exactly. And and this is related perhaps, but one of the things, I did 40 years as a band director before I became a composer. And it's so cool now. And like when I write my own pieces, I try to write in a lot more of those types of things to leave, less to the imagination. And um, there just wasn't anything hardly. I mean,
Hmm.
you might see a fermata here and a piano at the trio, and then the second time through it might say piano dash forte, so that you would know the first time through a strain you play soft and the second time you play louder. But even especially with percussion notation with marches, um, we try to do, I know a lot of the composers today, writing for middle school and high school, um, we try to add more to leave less to the imagination to help with that type of interpretation for marches. So,
And I know a lot of composers like say, well, no, we want to give the freedom for people to, yes, but as somebody who's very practical and my wife is as well, it's really nice to see all those things, knowing we still have more freedom on top of that. And I would also say listen to as many recordings of whatever that march is, because you might hear a recording that goes where they do something different and you might want to steal that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I also think this was a great segue because one of the pieces we're going to listen to of yours is a march. So I think we got to play that for people next. So next, we're going to start talking about one of your pieces with Excelsior called Aces of the Sky. Um, so tell us a little bit about it. I have some notes, but I want to hear from you.
Well, here I go. I'm sentimental, gang, so I'm just gonna go for it. A few years ago, I actually found out that I was adopted, and I am going to go somewhere with this. And I found out that I was raised by my father, and he was in the Air Force, the United States Air Force, for 25 years. But I also found out that I was half Vietnamese, and that my biological father was a pilot for South Vietnam. And so, without getting too much more involved in that, I really try to embrace the my newfound information about my background, but I also wanted to write an homage for both of my dads, my biological dad, and then my daddy, the guy that raised me, that I love with all my heart. So Aces of the Sky was born from that, and obviously it's about planes and Air Force kind of things. But there's also a little homage to my Asian father, and just little bits and pieces in the euphonium parts of the South Vietnamese national anthem. So there's a
I love
little
that.
bit of that, and they're kind of intertwined, which is kind of like how I feel about my life these days, a bit of both worlds. So, um, Aces of the Sky was the first march that I've had published, and I had that published through Excelsior Music Publishing. Um, Tyler R. Carey did a great job of editing that piece for me, and I'm super duper proud of it. And um, it's starting to pop up a little bit more and more. Folks will kind of reach out and let me know that they're playing it, and ask for any words of wisdom or special insight into certain sections. And it's just been a pleasure, that piece, in so many ways.
A couple of things that I think about it on the pedagogical side about why somebody may want to do this. You're choosing a march and you're looking for a grade two march. There are options, right? So, what I love about this, just some of the things that I wrote down, there's lots of the eighth quarter eighth. That's like that syncopation is everywhere. So if that's
Yes.
a rhythm you're working on, this is a great piece to use it. And I don't think there's any like permutations of that, right? It's like as it is. Um, Rhythmically, yeah. And
That's right.
then the chromatic work is awesome.
Thank
The A flat versus G sharp that happens a lot, and then the B natural and the E natural. I mean, there's just
you.
yeah,
But hopefully, if anyone has the time to actually give it a read with their group, it it luckily it sits pretty well under the fingers, and we were very pleased with that, how it actually sits, and that it is playable in that way. In addition, percussion wise, I've had a couple of my band director friends that actually are percussionists. Uh, this is one of the pieces that they reached out to me and thanked me for putting in just a little bit extra attention in that percussion part. So you'll hear a few more dynamic passages for the percussion. It's not just snare and bass and cymbal. There's a variety of different parts in ACEs. So I'm hoping that if anybody can give it a listen or maybe even a read with their group, that they'll really enjoy it. And if I can help,
Yep.
reach out to me and let me know that you're
Love it.
playing it.
Well, we're going to play it for people right now. So everybody, let's check it out. Here's Aces of the Sky. Love that piece. So we're going to start talking about some of the sort of key cornerstone things about developing, giving kids a great opportunity. I know we say middle school band, but band is band, right? Music is music. And one of those key things we want to talk about is relationships. So to kind of think back to your time, what are some of the things you've learned about the relationships with students?
You know, gosh, when I think about relationships with my middle school kiddos, it's something that I learned several years ago that really helped me. I had a wise um, role model tell me that to remember that middle school kids aren't working for the program, they're working for the teacher. And so I always try to keep that, in my mind that the band director is the single most important part of the program. I mean, and the kids are going to follow you forever if you're good to them and if you're warm, so it's what I would say that worked best for me was to um, just to remember that kids will love you, especially at great ages 11 through 14. I think 11 through 13, they don't join band to play scales and for chair placements and stuff. A lot of times they're in your band room sitting in the chair because they feel seen there, they feel safe there, they feel valued in band. And for some of them, the band room's the only place that they feel that way.
Yeah.
I had lots of kids where the teachers would come up to me and say, well, I can't believe this child's in the band. I mean, how do you manage to? Well, because we have a great relationship. We get along really well. He comes into band and it's kind of like his safe room. He can go in there and be himself and he's not odd man out and a lot of what he does is acceptable down there with us. And we encourage them to think at that higher level of
Yeah.
of the thought process. But I think something else that, as far as student relationships is concerned, I learned to be very consistent. Consistency builds that trust that you need in order for them to buy the stuff that we're selling as far as band music and stuff is concerned. Um, I also try to use humor in the classroom. I think that kids are really they're looking for a way at that age to build a connection with you. And, humor is a really easy way to me, maybe not so much for someone else, but for me to be able to bridge um, over to the kid. Um,
Any advice you might have, because you talked about showing warmth to them, um, about showing warmth and being that person while also being a disciplinarian who has limits and there's acceptable things to do. And you know what I mean? Like, how do you, because you kind of have to be able to do both depending on the band in front
yeah,
of you and the kids in front of you.
well, I think they really need so many kids, at least the ones that I taught, Kyle, just needed somebody to love them. They needed somebody to care about them, and that comes down to some of these things we hear in workshops about learn their name quickly, try to meet them at the door, have a smile for them, listen to their story about going to see grandma up in New York. There's lots of ways that you can, be warm with them and show that you care. And I think once they feel like they can trust you and that you care about them, we get to have them for 3 years. And if you work at the high school and you're lucky enough, you get to see them grow for 7 more, 7 years in some instances. So, but I would just say get to know them, call them by name, and care about them. Show that you care about them as human beings too.
I also had somebody tell me that they explained to their kids that the band director on the podium was very different from the band director off the podium. That when you're on the podium, there's different roles and responsibilities, whereas off the podium, you can act a little bit different. So something to think
Yeah,
about as
and
well.
that's something that I was going to mention to you. High expectations plus warmth can equal growth.
Yeah,
So
love that. Okay, so segueing into programming because I love this. Like, how do we pro? So I learned for early in my career, 90% of the success of a group is based on the literature they're playing, right? I mean, if it's appropriate for them, 90% of the job is done. That last 10% is very important and extremely important, but choosing the music is so important that if you get that wrong, everything else kind of falls by the wayside. Um, but we're sort of trying to find that sweet spot of the programming for the kids with their growth, not just programming where they are, but where are they going to be without stretching them too much. The programming thing, is just a huge tenet of what we do.
well, yes, and it's so important. And I honestly I want to tell everybody right now, I am no expert in programming. In fact, still to this day, even recently, I felt just a tinge like I had possibly overprogrammed for a group. Um, you don't want to overprogram, you don't want to underprogram, So I guess basically we have to be perfect.
One th-
But
one th- one thing I find hard now, I want to just interject is like kids are less predictable. There's a lot of times where I say, okay, I've programmed this and I know these kids well, and this is perfect. But in the first month of rehearsing this piece, they're being lazy slobs, or whatever. Like they're not doing anything. It's like, wait a minute, this is not too hard. You're not holding up your end. And then, the second month they realize, oh, the concert's okay, here we go. And then all of a sudden you realize, okay, I was right. It's fine. But they weren't holding up their end of the bargain. So that's just like a whole other thing we got to think about is the kids are not predictable.
you know, in my cases, I think, or this is how I feel about programming. It's like the quiet superpower of a
Hmm.
successful band director.
There you go.
And it doesn't mean you have to nail it every time, but it's probably our most effective tool to be successful. And it's something that you have to really give some thought to. You really actually need to study the scores. I know a lot of folks they're so talented. They're just able to just, jump on that podium and just start going to town and they're amazing and they might even do well, with the group until the time that they overprogram or they underprogram. For me, you don't want to go over and you don't want to go under. You want to get as, like you said, you want to get as close to that sweet spot as you absolutely can. And not only for the performance, of course, the performance is, you know, the end result, but it's the education of the kiddos too. Are you actually giving them what they need to grow and to take your program from point A to point Z? If a piece is too hard, the tone is going to suffer, probably. Um, their confidence level, I've seen kids just kind of lose their confidence in being able to play. They don't think that they're good enough to be able to play. Or the rehearsals feel stressful for everybody. And if a piece is too easy, then, they can get bored. They can get in trouble.
So
Nah.
so people
Um,
don't think about this, but the culture of the band, a lot of it goes into it, but the programming of what you're doing can tear kids down, can build kids up. I mean, the programming is a huge part of that culture. I also hear from a lot of people who talk about, say, I have four pieces on a concert. One might be a sweet spot, one's a little bit of a push, one's a little bit easier, like how they kind of vary within the program as well.
yeah, that's where I was going. I mean, if you will just consider as you're programming like one reach piece where you're going to have to stretch a little bit, you're really going to have to push them, but it's achievable, you know. And then maybe a solid core piece that will teach specific skills or, something like that. And then maybe pick a confidence builder, a crowd pleaser for, and then you've really only got that one stretch piece where you're really going to have to get the kids to really, really, really stretch and pull. Um, but I've had some really good results planning that way. And like I said, it's just it can be a nightmare, and it can just feel horrible if you've overprogrammed, and then you realize the realization that it was you.
Yeah.
you know, you're the one that picked the pieces, and you're the one that put them out there in front of the kids, and now you've got to teach them, and it that can be the longest semester known to man.
But the biggest thing is learn from that and, just don't just keep doing it over and over again.
Yes.
Um, all right,
Yeah.
so let's listen to another one of your pieces. This is Giant Slayer. This is
Okay.
a grade one, about 2 minutes long, six percussion parts, G minor. Thank you, because I live with a woman who, great middle school teacher, who tells me all the time, there's too much C minor. I know we need C minor, but like 4 out of 5 pieces are in C minor. So sometimes I see a piece, it's like, that's great, but it's in C minor. So the fact that you're in G minor is fantastic. And F sharp is only used once in the trumpet, two measures in a row, and once in the flute. So very judiciously used. Thank you.
This was a piece that I wanted to write to be a work piece. I was, at the time, I was thinking, if I was the band director at the last school that I was at, which was right there at the end of COVID, what would I like to have taught, to my kids? What kind of a piece would I like to have? Well, kids like anything with giants and dragons, of course. And so I thought, well, let's do a little piece like that. And I try not to drop any names, but there are some very popular composers out uh, now that have got some pretty cool pieces, that they're kind of a driving piece. They sound kind of tough a little bit. And then they give the melody to the low brass. The melody goes around the band a little bit. Even the middle instruments, the horns and saxophones get a little bit of the fun. Um, so that's how Giant Slayer came about. I really wanted it to be a G minor work piece, and it turned out really well, I think. I've had several folks that have used it to teach G minor, and also to teach some of the accidentals. There's a variety of articulations in there and dynamics. It's a little different style than some of the other pieces that are currently out, I think, in grade one. So, gosh.
Beautiful. All right. Well, let's check it out. Here's Giant Slayer. Kaiser Productions is honored to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast. As a publisher for Ludwig Masters and Southern Music, they uphold a proud tradition of outstanding musicianship. They share your passion for teaching through performance at all levels with music and resources for band and flexible instrumentation. Their catalog has essential literature by Francis Macbeth, James Barnes, and Frederick Fennell, as well as exciting new works, many by composers who've been guests on this very podcast. Whether you're looking for timeless classics, fresh new works, or your next contest piece, look no further than Kaiser Productions at kaiserproductions.com. That's KEISER Productions.com. Austin Custom Brass is a proud sponsor of today's podcast. They can be found online at austincustombrass.biz. The Austin Custom Brass shop is located in Kansas City, Missouri. They're frequent attendees at MEAs around the country, including a TMEA in Texas and Kansas and Missouri. They go to Midwest and Chicago and International Trumpet Guild. And give them a call today at 816-410-0826. If it's anything brass, they have it. Amano Music is a proud sponsor of the Growing Band Director podcast. If you're a band director looking for a clear path to grow your program, take a look at the Band Director's Goal Setting Planner. It helps you map out your priorities, organize your year, and stay focused on the things that truly move your program forward. Inside the planner, you'll find tools for long-term planning, weekly goal setting, reflection, and building stronger support systems for your students and community. You can find the Band Director's Goal Setting Planner at amanomusic.com. That's AAMANO music.com. And listeners to the Growing Band Director podcast receive a special 10% discount by entering the code GBD10 at checkout. That's GBD and the number 10 at checkout. Do you spend valuable time all year correcting your students' hand position instead of focusing on the music? Thumb Gummy solves that. These simple, cost-effective teaching aids fit on trumpets and trombones to guide the right hand into proper playing position, reducing tension, improving form, and giving tactile feedback so students can focus on playing, not adjusting. It's easy to use, comfortable, and designed by teachers and players for beginners as well as older students. Join thousands already seeing the difference, and keep an eye out for our new clarinet thumb rest coming soon. Visit thumbgummy.com to learn more. That's thumbgummy.com. Band or orchestra director looking to streamline your rehearsals and help your students take ownership of their intonation, you need to know about Tuner Caddy. It was invented by Mark Casperson, a veteran band director with 38 years in the classroom. Like lots of us, he was tired of drop tuners, scattered materials, and constant reminders. So he created a solution, and after 57 prototypes, the Tuner Caddy was born. It's been used by some of the most respected programs in the country. Mouse Middle School, Cooper Junior High School, Harbor Creek and Creek Valley, Rushing Middle School, Stiles and Grisham Middle Schools, and the Henry Middle School Band, which was a 2024 CCC Honor Band of Texas. These aren't just good groups, they're the best of the best. When they step on stage at Midwest, TMEA, or Music for All, many of them have Tuner Caddy right there with them. It's been used by university music ed professors to help train future teachers because it works. The classic fits most stands and includes a pencil holder. Student Pro is slim, binder ready, and magnetized, and the new Tuner Metronome combo transposes and has a 6-foot mic, ideal for students and directors alike. You can get them at tunercaddy.com, Music and Arts, Sweetwater, Premier Music Teaching Aids, and local retailers. They even offer grant writing support for educators. Check them out. Okay, one of my biggest pet peeves of people is people who don't respond to either text message or email. So if you're one of those people, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but it speaks to organization, right? And we all know that if you want to be a successful band director, the kids have to be organized, which means you need to be organized in so many different ways. And one way to do that is like to be on top of email. So that's sort of my little piece. What are some of your thoughts, Christina, about the organizational piece of being a band director?
Well, I agree. And I think I agree because I found out the hard way. I just felt like I could do some stuff early in my career, just kind of off the cuff. And sometimes I had luck with that. Sometimes I didn't. And those first couple of years, I felt like I needed to look up all of my students and apologize to them and their parents for what on earth I was
I'm
thinking
with you. Yeah.
those first couple of years of teaching. But I guess as I realized that organization is key to having a successful program. It truly is, and it makes your job so much easier. You'll end up finding that you're able to get so much more done, and you're so much more effective, and it's so much less stressful if you just organize things.
And a couple tips I have towards that are A, write things down, and B, do things ahead of time. It's just like, it's not harder. It's just do it a week or two earlier than you think you need to, and all of a sudden you're organized.
And document everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, all the stuff coming into you, document it. And that not only protects you, but it also helps you to remember, because there are times if you were like I was, I could be just, not doing a whole lot, and then everything happened at one time. And then I, would be expected to keep up with this or explain where we were going with that. And, I think the organizational skills for me really were kind of born out of trying to better my relationships with the parents and to stay on top of, you know, my communicating with them. And I found the more frequently I communicated with them, the more I involved them in some of the musical decisions that I was making, the more they bought into the program. The parents, in a lot of ways, became, really big advocates for the program that way. And it all kind of just came out of me wanting to organize my program. When we have middle school programs, we're going to organized differently than when we have high school programs. Middle school, for me, I had to think about it and compartmentalize it. Like sixth grade was, primarily I'm going to build fundamentals for the sixth graders. Seventh graders, I'm going to expand their range and try to teach them some independence on their instrument. Totally different from sixth grade. And in order to do that, I had to have, my I actually had to pre-think things and not just use the band book for a curriculum because I did that for a while, When I was young, I would go out and buy, whatever band book, and that was the curriculum. And I didn't add to it or take away from it. I felt like I was being successful just going through the band book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Eighth grade, you're going to introduce mature musicality and more complexity, and then you have to start putting your attention toward the fact that you're building the high school musicians now, and so organizing just in that way by compartmentalizing the goal that you have for each year of middle school band helped a ton.
Yep.
Um,
Love that.
so
I had a guest one time tell me, take more off your plate than you think you need to, and only what was his phrase? Um, where is it? Do only what only you can do. So anything that somebody else can do for you, other students can do, devote your time to only things that you can do. For example, score study and lots of other things. So
right,
I'm not saying I'm
right.
always good at that, but it's definitely something we strive for. All right, Christina, in our time left, we want to talk a little bit about recruitment and then also listen to one last piece, a wonderful ballad of yours. So let's talk about recruitment. What are some kind of successful things that you found when recruiting students?
Gosh, we did everything. We tried everything, and I'm just going to tell you, I think the very best recruitments that I did, I had really good communication with my with the elementary school teachers. I mean, you should always try to have a good relationship with your elementary music teachers. I mean, because they're your pipeline for your recruitment. That's your pipeline. Those fifth grade music teachers, in a lot of instances, if you start in the sixth grade. I had a good rapport with them. They actually would help us. They would be present for the recruitment. I would always take a concert group over. We would play a couple pieces that we thought that the elementary school kids would like to play, maybe something that they might even hear, dare I say, at a football game.
Hmm.
We even did trash cans for them. I think we played a piece that involved a vacuum cleaner, just things that the younger kids would really enjoy.
When you're going to sell out, you got to really sell out, and it works.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's
Yeah.
right. And then I would always try to use my student leadership in the band because let's face it, middle school kiddos are a lot cooler than we are. And so who better to sell the band than kids that are currently in the band?
Yep.
So yeah, that always was a good recruitment for me. But it was important to keep those relationships with the principal and the middle school music. I mean, the elementary music school teachers. You know, uh, they were a big part of it. They would be at the concert. They would be talking on the mic. I mean, these kids don't know me, but they did know their principal and they did know their music teacher from fifth grade. So, if they liked them, maybe these middle school directors are okay. That kind
But
of thing.
that's
Yep.
great. Well, again, Christina, thank you so much for your time. We're going to talk about Song for Peace now. Grade two lyric work, five percussion parts, 3.5 minutes long. It is in B flat, but also very fresh harmonically. I didn't get into like all the chord progressions to like go music theory on us, but you did find a very good way of making it refreshing sounding, fresh sounding within the key of B flat. And I just wanted to mention before you talk about it a little bit that even though there are solos, right? Horn, euphonium, alto sax, trumpet, that if you're like missing one of those kiddos, you can still do the piece and like write it out for somebody else. Don't let that stop you.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. In fact, I think even at Midwest last year, or was it the year before, somebody that was going to play one of my pieces for Midwest was like, "Hey, could I rewrite this for flute instead of for clarinet?" Or absolutely. And I don't know if it would be a surprise to a lot of directors, but a lot of composers feel that way. Yeah, so absolutely. I when I first started writing, I wrote a lot for the kids that I was missing during COVID.
Mhm.
And so these first couple pieces, like Song for Peace and Forevermore, I had a variety of wind solos in there, and they're not long solos. They're just maybe 3 or 4 measures here, maybe 4 measures there. But I feel like it's important. We usually have good players in every section. And I hated whenever I would get a piece and it would just have the trumpet solo in it or the flute solo. Maybe if we were lucky, a sax, like an alto or a clarinet solo. But at middle school level, it seemed to me that it was usually flute or trumpet.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I like to do with young band music is pass that around because there's a lot of good teaching going on. And there are some really amazing players out there that are looking for, you know, nice little things to kind of sink their teeth into. And it's so nice to be sitting out in the audience and hear a beautiful clarinet solo in the shallow being
Mm.
played, or a wonderful saxophone player or horn player playing a young band piece, a solo for a young band piece. So that's kind of my idea for Song for Peace.
Love it. Well, Christina, thank you so much for the time. It is the last thing on the podcast today, so we're gonna put the whole piece out there. We'll do 3.5 minutes, and that will be the end of what we do. If people want to reach out to you, I encourage them to do that over Facebook or Google your name, or you're easy to find.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Thank you so very much,
Yeah.
Kyle.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.